May 28, 1940. Reich Air Ministry, Berlin. Reich Marshal Hermann Göring dropped the intelligence report on his desk with open scorn. The paper outlined President Roosevelt's request to Congress for a massive boost in American aircraft output, a goal of building 50,000 planes every year. The Americans must be desperate if they think this kind of talk will scare us, Göring told his officers. They know nothing about war production. Let them try turning their car factories into plane plants. They'll soon realize making warplanes takes more than just assembly lines. What Göring didn't realize was that in Detroit, a Danish-born engineer named William Knudsen was already proving him wrong. The former head of General Motors, now working for Roosevelt for only $1 a year, was leading one of the largest industrial shifts ever seen. In just 4 years, U.S. factories would build not the impossible 50,000 planes Göring mocked, but almost 100,000 per year, all while supplying 2 wars on opposite sides of the world. Roosevelt's bold call had come on May 16, 1940, while German tanks rolled through France. Standing before Congress, he said, "I would like to see this nation capable of producing at least 50,000 planes a year." Many doubted him, even among allies. In 1939, America had built only 3,611 military aircraft. The Army Air Corps owned just 1,700 usable planes, most outdated. Still, Roosevelt demanded production increase 14-fold. The man to make it happen was William Knudsen. When asked who could possibly achieve such output, advisor Bernard Baruch replied, "First, Bill Knudsen. Second, Bill Knudsen. Third, Bill Knudsen." The industrial genius gave up his $300,000 salary to serve his new country, bringing car-making methods into aircraft production. The shift began right away. By December 1941, the U.S. was making 2,000 military planes a month, 20 times more than 2 years before. Ford announced a giant bomber plant at Willow Run, Michigan. Boeing expanded in Seattle, and Douglas Aircraft hired thousands. America's arsenal of democracy was coming to life. Germany's leaders dismissed U.S. ability because of arrogance and racism. General Friedrich von Boedicher, the German military attaché in Washington from 1933 to 1941, had sent accurate reports describing the massive American buildup. In late 1940, he warned Berlin, U.S. war production will reach unimaginable levels. His warnings were ignored as defeatist. When Boedicher met Hitler in 1939 to discuss America's potential, Hitler went on a rant about race instead of listening. He claimed Americans were half Jews, half Negroes, and too weak for a long war. This prejudice blinded Germany to reality. Luftwaffe intelligence dismissed reports of women working in aircraft factories as a sign of U.S. weakness, not strength. They couldn't imagine that a democracy might outproduce a dictatorship. When told that U.S. factories were running non-stop in 3 shifts, German analysts called it exaggeration. Their worldview simply didn't allow for what was happening. Ford's Willow Run plant became the symbol of American might. Built on farmland starting in April 1941, it grew into the largest single factory on Earth, 3.5 million square feet, with an assembly line a mile long. Production chief Charles Sorensen promised to build 1 B-24 bomber every hour, though most other factories took a full day to make one. At first, it was a mess. The first bomber completed in 1942 had to be rebuilt. Half of the output failed quality checks. By early 1943, Willow Run was turning out only 56 bombers a month, far below targets. Critics mocked it as "Will it run?" But Ford's engineers refused to quit. They broke the bomber's nearly 500,000 parts into sections, created new tools, wiring systems, and moving lines. They adapted to 578 design changes that year alone. By September 1943, the plant built 148 bombers a month. By December, 365. In April 1944, they hit 428, 1 bomber every 63 minutes, 24 hours a day. That single plant was producing more aircraft than all of Germany combined. German pilots saw America's growing power firsthand during the North Africa campaign. Major Johannes Steinhoff of JG-77 noted in December 1942, "The American pilots are no longer amateurs. Worse, their numbers keep growing." The truth was becoming clear. On January 27, 1943, American bombers struck Germany itself for the first time, hitting Wilhelmshaven. By October, during Black Thursday at Schweinfurt, the U.S. could lose 60 bombers and replace them in 2 weeks. The numbers no longer favored Germany. During Big Week, February 20th to 25th, 1944, the U.S. 8th and 15th Air Forces flew 3,500 bomber missions against German aircraft plants. The Luftwaffe lost between 262 and 355 fighters, and more importantly, about 100 of its best pilots. General Adolf Galland warned Göring that Germany was losing 1,200 fighters a month while building only 1,000. The U.S. was producing 2,500 fighters monthly and losing 400. Major Heinz Bahr, one of Germany's top aces with 220 kills, recalled a mission over Brunswick in January 1944. The bomber stream stretched from horizon to horizon, at least 700 flying fortresses and liberators. We were 8 fighters. It was hopeless. By 1944, American aircraft production reached unbelievable levels. That year alone, factories turned out 96,270 planes, including 16,000 heavy bombers, 35,700 fighters, and over 22,000 twin-engine aircraft. That 1 year of U.S. output surpassed Germany's entire wartime total of about 94,000 aircraft. And the difference wasn't only in numbers. Each American bomber carried 13 heavy machine guns and thousands of rounds. German fighters often took off with half their ammo. U.S. planes had powered gun turrets, precise bomb sights, and advanced navigation systems. German ones often flew with broken radios. By May 1944, Boeing's Plant 2 in Seattle was building 16 B-17s every day. Douglas Aircraft, which had just 68 workers in 1936, now employed 167,000 people in 9 plants. North American Aviation produced 500 P-51 Mustangs a month. Lockheed rolled out 1 P-38 Lightning every 90 minutes while managing more than 2,000 combat-driven design updates. Supporting industries kept pace. General Motors built nearly 58,000 aircraft engines. Packard produced over 55,000 Rolls-Royce Merlins. Alcoa boosted aluminum production 6-fold. Dow Chemical's magnesium output jumped from 6 million to 333 million pounds a year. The changes in America's workforce completely shattered Nazi beliefs. In 1941, women made up less than 1% of aircraft workers, but by 1943, they formed 65% of the labor force, about 310,000 women in the industry. At Douglas Aircraft in Long Beach, more than half the staff were women. One of them, Roswell Monroe, the real Rosie the Riveter, could drive 3,000 rivets each shift at Willow Run with almost perfect accuracy. At Douglas, female inspectors cut defect rates from 3.2% down to 0.3%. Ford redesigned its tools to fit smaller hands, which unexpectedly made them easier for everyone to use. Lighter power tools helped reduce fatigue, and better workbench setups meant fewer injuries. German intelligence saw the rise of women workers as a sign of weakness. A captured Luftwaffe report predicted that using women meant the end of quality. But instead, results improved. Women proved excellent at precise, detailed jobs, wiring, assembling instruments, and inspecting work. Their success showed the strength of a free and cooperative workforce, not a desperate one. As American output exploded, Germany slipped deeper into denial. Göring approved the Jaeger program in early 1944, scattering production into more than 700 underground sites powered by slave labor. One complex alone used 60,000 prisoners under horrific conditions, with around 20,000 dying. These hidden factories turned out more faulty parts than working planes. Forced workers sabotaged what they made, and moving parts between locations caused long delays. Quality collapsed. The entire Middleworks site built fewer engines each month than Ford's Chicago plant. Meanwhile, American innovation kept growing. Boeing developed a new modular system for building the B-29 bomber in 4 plants, with every piece perfectly interchangeable. Each pressurized B-29 cost about $65,000 and used technology Germany couldn't even finish testing. By early 1945, U.S. factories were turning out 100 B-29s every month. June 6, 1944, D-Day showed what that production meant. The Allies used 11,590 aircraft against only 319 German planes, a 36-to-1 advantage. This wasn't just air power, it was industrial dominance. Between January and May 1944, American and British bombers dropped 145,000 tons on German targets, more than Germany had ever dropped on Britain during the entire war. Transport planes carried 3 airborne divisions in a single day, using more aircraft than Germany's entire transport force had at its peak. By late 1944, one raid could include 1,200 bombers and 900 fighters. The 51 Mustang could reach Poland, outfly any German aircraft, and was produced in such numbers that losses hardly mattered. German pilots nicknamed them Indians, saying they seemed to appear everywhere at once. As defeat closed in, even top Nazis admitted how bad the situation was. In December 1944, Joseph Goebbels wrote in his diary that Göring's promises about Luftwaffe dominance now seem like criminal lies. "We are fighting the world's greatest industrial power with words," he lamented. Field Marshal Rommel had warned his staff before D-Day, "The Americans can lose 10 tanks for every one we destroy and still crush us. When they land, they'll have such overwhelming material force that nothing can hold." Even Hitler later told aides in January 1945, "We should have listened to Boetticher's reports. Their industry decided the war. While we built hundreds, they built tens of thousands." After the war, Albert Speer confirmed that Allied bombing cut German production by more than a third, 35% for tanks, 31% for aircraft, and 42% for trucks. He admitted that the American system of coordinated strikes on industrial targets broke Germany's war machine. Germany's Me-262 jet fighter, which entered combat in mid-1944, was a real technological leap, about 100 miles per hour faster than any Allied plane. Hitler and Göring saw it as a miracle weapon that would save them, but only 1,430 were built, and fewer than 200 were ever ready at the same time. Their engines wore out after 10 hours, and shortages forced the use of weak materials. Meanwhile, the U.S. had begun jet research back in 1942. The Bell P-59 didn't perform as well as the German jet, but Lockheed's P-80 Shooting Star, faster and more reliable, went into production before the war ended. America's massive industrial base let it develop several advanced designs at once, something Germany could never manage. That contrast summed up the whole war in production. Germany had advanced technology, but couldn't mass produce it. America had both quantity and quality. In total war, quality without numbers meant defeat. Hermann Göring's arrest on May 8, 1945, by troops from the U.S. 36th Infantry Division began his reckoning with reality. At first, in custody, he insisted that German technology had been superior, beaten only by American numbers. Later, after being moved to Camp Ashcan in Luxembourg for high-ranking Nazi prisoners, he faced intense questioning. In July 1945, Major Kenneth Heckler interviewed Göring many times and recorded his gradual acceptance of the truth. Göring finally said, "I knew America had great industrial power, but I never imagined such execution. That single factory at Willow Run, it made more bombers than our entire Air Force at its strongest. It was beyond belief." He was especially stunned by U.S. logistics. "You supplied armies across 2 oceans while still producing at home. We couldn't even supply troops 500 miles away." At Nuremberg, prosecutors confronted Göring with evidence of America's overwhelming production. Charts showed that by 1944, the U.S. was building more planes in 1 month than Germany managed in a year. They played films of Willow Run's assembly lines as they listed the German cities bombed by aircraft from that one plant. During testimony on March 14, 1946, Göring admitted, "I always thought America's industrial and technical power was enormous, especially its Air Force. But I never imagined it could increase aircraft production 100-fold in 4 years. It seemed physically impossible." Psychologist G.M. Gilbert later noted Göring's obsession with production statistics. He constantly compared U.S. and German factories, fixated on Willow Run, calling it "that cursed plant that broke our backs." When shown the numbers, America's 812,000 aircraft engines against Germany's 241,000, he fell silent. The math said it all. The scale of America's transformation remains staggering. From just 3,611 planes in 1940, U.S. production reached nearly 296,000 by war's end, 97,000 bombers, 99,000 fighters, and almost 99,000 other aircraft. But it wasn't only about numbers, it was about how it was done. 2 million Americans worked in aircraft plants, representing unmatched diversity. Women, African Americans, Mexican Americans, Native Americans, disabled workers, seniors, and teens all contributed. This free, united effort achieved what dictatorship could not: voluntary teamwork that outperformed forced labor in every way. The men and women who entered the factories in 1941 knowing nothing about airplanes left in 1945 as the most skilled aviation workforce in the world. They didn't just build planes, they changed how the world built everything. Statistical quality control, first built for bomber lines, soon became normal practice in factories everywhere. The automation ideas tested at Willow Run spread across the world. The engineers who set up those wartime assembly lines later planned the Saturn V. The women who riveted B-24s raised the generation that went to the moon. The production miracle did not stop with VE Day. It kicked off the American century. The money scale shocked economists. Aircraft programs cost about $45 billion in 1940s dollars, around $800 billion today. The B-29 alone cost more than the Manhattan Project. Yet instead of ruining the country, this spending fueled record growth. Depression-era unemployment disappeared. Personal incomes doubled from 1940 to 1945. Workers themselves financed much of the surge with war bonds. Willow Run employees alone bought $45 million, helping fund their own plant. Germany told a different story. By 1944, it poured about 40% of its entire industry into aircraft and still built less than half of U.S. output. Heavy use of slave labor backfired. Sabotage was common, quality collapsed, and after 1943 output per worker fell, while American productivity jumped roughly 300%. The factories, tools, and skills built for war became the base of post-war wealth. Aluminum smelters that fed bombers soon supplied suburban housing. Refineries and chemical plants that made high-octane fuel turned to plastics and consumer goods. Machine tool makers that equipped aircraft plants retooled the wider economy for global leadership. Beyond raw numbers, organization made the difference. The War Production Board coordinated 184,000 companies with tight scheduling. IBM punch card systems tracked millions of parts across thousands of suppliers. At MIT's Radiation Laboratory, 4,000 scientists built navigation and radar gear that gave bombers all-weather capability. When combat exposed the B-17's weakness to head-on attacks, Boeing added a chin turret in about 2 months. When the Pacific demanded more range, Consolidated reworked B-24s without stopping the line. German changes took months or years. American upgrades took weeks. This speed mattered as much as volume. U.S. aircraft evolved constantly with lessons from every front. Reports from the Pacific reached factory floors in days. German plants, hidden underground and staffed by coerced labor, stood still while U.S. designs improved week by week. The feedback loop was unmatched. Pilots' notes reached engineers right away. Engineers' fixes reached the lines within days. Line workers' suggestions flowed back to designers. This open, bottom-up information flow outperformed rigid top-down command. On October 15, 1946, hours before his scheduled execution, Hermann Göring wrote his last letter, making his clearest admission about the production war. The Americans, he said, won with industry more than with battlefield skill. Germany was beaten not by better soldiers, but by better factories. The nation they had mocked for making consumer goods buried the Wehrmacht under aluminum and steel. His final remark to psychologist G.M. Gilbert echoed the same point. Germany had declared war on a sleeping industrial giant. Once awake, defeat was certain. They were not merely outproduced. The Americans reinvented production. Every part of their system worked better. Göring killed himself that night, but his last words read like the verdict on the industrial war. The marshal who had sneered at U.S. capacity died knowing that one American plant surpassed the lifetime output of his bomber force. Military historians widely judge American production as the crucial factor behind Allied victory. Without that overwhelming supply, D-Day could not have happened, the air campaign could not have been sustained, and the Pacific War could not have been won. Air War scholar Richard Overy concluded that the outcome turned on material weight, not just morale or clever tactics. The Allies triumphed because they buried the Axis under sheer output. The figures are decisive. By 1944, the United States alone made more military aircraft than the rest of the world combined. This was not a small edge. It was dominance by orders of magnitude. Germany did not merely lose. It was crushed. Yet the importance of the miracle went beyond victory. It proved that democracy beats dictatorship in mobilization, that freedom outperforms coercion, and that voluntary cooperation outworks forced labor. The people who made this possible were not slaves or conscripts. They were free citizens working toward a shared goal. Göring's contempt for democratic industry ranks among history's worst misjudgments. Underestimating America's capacity cost Germany the war and millions of lives. His refusal to see U.S. potential doomed the Reich before the first mass raids hit German cities. The climb from roughly 3,000 aircraft a year to nearly 100,000 showed that a free society facing a mortal threat can deliver what seems impossible. American workers did more than meet Roosevelt's challenge. They doubled it. They did more than match German output. They beat it fivefold while fighting across two oceans. Modern leaders should remember that mistake. Writing off democracies as weak because they prefer peace, or misreading free peoples as soft because they prize prosperity, invites disaster. In 1940, America looked unready. By 1944, it had become an industrial powerhouse that could not be stopped. The arsenal of democracy proved that production lines can weigh as much as front lines, that the people on the line are as vital as the troops at the front, that mobilization can decide a war as surely as strategy. Göring learned too late. From his scornful reaction to Roosevelt's 1940 call to his end in 1946, his story mirrors Germany's fall. He confused ideology with ability, mistook tyranny for strength, and believed racial myth could beat arithmetic. The marshal who mocked American aircraft production died knowing U.S. factories built more planes in 1944 than Germany made in the whole war. His joke about democratic industry became the costliest laugh in history, paid for with total defeat. The totals tell the tale. America built 295,959 military aircraft. Germany made 94,677. But the deeper win was in the method. Free workers outproduced slaves. Open cooperation outperformed command. A nation of immigrants and diverse citizens united to do what the world thought could not be done. Every B-24 rolling off Willow Run every 63 minutes was more than a machine. It was a reply to tyranny, a rivet set by a woman who had been a homemaker months earlier, an engine built by a teenager who left school to serve, a wing assembled by workers who knew hardship and still showed up. Altogether, they proved that free people, when united for a just cause, can bury tyranny under a mountain of production. Göring scoffed at the idea of 50,000 planes a year. America answered with twice that and changed world history in the process. His laughter lingers only as the sound of a fatal mistake, the final misreading of a democracy he never understood, buried under 300,000 aircraft that turned contempt into absolute defeat.